Good day, Black Knight history scholars. It's 6-2 VidNotes. Let's roll up our sleeves and get after it. First, the learning target. I will understand how African countries became independent. Last lesson, we talked about resistance to European imperialism. And today, we're going to get more specific as to how that resistance turned into real independence movements for the continent of Africa. First, a definition review of imperialism. Please write this definition down as I say it. It's a country's plan to increase its power by taking over another country. And that's what Europe has done historically to Africa throughout its history, especially after 1400. The UN gives Africa permission to be free. The UN stands for the United Nations, and the United Nations is formed in 1945 after World War I. And the date of independence, check out these dates. They're all after World War II. World War II triggers independence for Africa. The UN gives Africa permission, the United Nations, and self-determination. This is the story. The charter or the mission statement of the UN, and here's the charter here, it promised people in colonies the right to self-determination, which means to decide their own future. After this decision, African countries start independence movements to challenge European imperialism. That's when the resistance starts. Why was African independence successful? Two reasons. Reason number one, World War II. African countries participate in the fighting of World War II, as you see here, and this creates even more pride for African culture and heritage among the continent's people, more pride than existed before. Reason number two is anger. There was resentment or anger toward European imperial rule and toward economic exploitation, meaning Europeans taking advantage of Africans to get wealthy for their own profit. And here's an example with the ivory industry in Africa. Let's get specific with examples of African independence now. What European countries lost power because of these resistance movements? Britain, France, Belgium, and Portugal lost their colonies in Africa after World War II. There they are. Independence in West Africa. We travel there first to this country in green. What is this country on the Gold Coast or the Slave Coast, as it's sometimes called? Well, in the year 1957, Ghana fought non-violently for independence from Britain. The movement was led by this man. His name was Kwame Nkrumah. How do you spell that? Here it is, Kwame Nkrumah. Ghana's independence relied on Nkrumah's leadership. What's that story? Listen and write. Britain imprisoned Nkrumah twice, first in 1947, again in 1951, for organizing strikes and protests. He formed a radical political party that won Ghana's elections in 1951. After that, Nkrumah negotiated a new constitution, a new form of government with Britain, and then became Ghana's first prime minister. Ghana's example became a model for the rest of Africa to follow. So Nkrumah was an important part of the African independence story, from prison to president. Now we go to another country further north. This is Algeria, independence in Algeria. In 1954, it started a bloody war with France. France had taken the country's best farmland. And in 1962, Algeria won its independence. And this is a battle scene from the streets of Algeria. It's 1 million French versus 7 million Algerians, and it didn't end well for the French. although there was much loss of life on both sides. And we go to another country. This is the independence movement in Kenya. Kenya. In the 1950s, a rebel group called the Mau Mau, M-A-U, attacked British settlers. The rebels were led by Jomo Kenyatta, this man. How do you spell Jomo Kenyatta? That it is. And who was he? He was jailed by Britain in 1951. More on Kenyatta. Kenyatta's imprisonment caused the rebellion to grow. And in 1963, Kenya won independence, and Kenyatta became the first president. So there's Kenyatta, and there he is, the statue of him. The Kenyan people think of him so highly that they have a statue that is in Nairobi, one of the major cities in Kenya today. Now we go further south from Kenya to South Africa. Britain and the Netherlands colonized land in South Africa. In 1948, the policy of apartheid began. And that's how you spell apartheid. What was it? It separated citizens based on race. And this is a beach in South Africa that says white area only. And this is another sign that is truly troubling. It says danger. Skull and crossbones. Natives and Indians and coloreds. If you enter these premises at night, you will be listed as missing. Armed guards shoot on sight. Savage dogs devour the corpse. That's an actual sign in South Africa. It shows the division. But there's independence in South Africa, and it's led by this man from prison to president once again. Do you know who it is? It's Nelson Mandela. Here's the story. In 1990, a black political activist named Nelson Mandela was released from prison after 27 years. In 1964, Mandela and 8 other leaders of the African National Congress were convicted of conspiracy to overthrow the government, which at that time was controlled by white Europeans. The protesters, including Mandela, demanded an end to apartheid, which the government supported at the time. And this is a young Mandela, and this is the bus that he and the other leaders were put in on the way to prison. And Mandela said when he was being carted off to prison, "I am prepared to die." That's how serious he took this movement. In 1994, Mandela became the first democratically elected, the first black president of South Africa. And there he is at the swearing in ceremony. He is the leader of South Africa in that picture. Now, maybe you've seen this movie, Black Panther, and Wakanda Forever. It says, now this is a fictional country in Africa, but is it based on reality in any way? Is there a real Wakanda? Some historians think yes. And here is the real Wakanda. It's Ethiopia. Ethiopia. And why are we talking about this? Look at this. African colonies after the Berlin Conference of 1884, which was so important. Look at the only country that's in gray here. It's Ethiopia. It was able to avoid and resist imperialism and colonialism, except for a little brief time during World War II when the Italians took it over. But why was Ethiopia largely able to avoid European imperialism and colonialism? Why is it like Wakanda? Well, let's take a look. 3 reasons. 70% of Africa's mountains are found in Ethiopia. So mountains protect, and mountains make it hard to take over a country. Leaders of Ethiopia used European ideas to build cities and to trade for guns. So there is good technology and there is good infrastructure in Ethiopia